was past midnight in the quiet physics lab. Most of the building was dark. Only one room still had light. A young researcher stood alone in front of a glowing computer screen. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he did not notice. On the screen were numbers, graphs, and tiny patterns of light. He had run the same experiment many times that week. Each time he expected normal results. Each time the universe gave him something strange. The experiment was simple, at least on paper. A beam of tiny particles was fired toward a barrier with two small openings. Behind the barrier was a screen that recorded where the particles landed. If the particles behaved like solid objects, they would pass through one opening or the other. If they behaved like waves, they would pass through both openings at once and create a wave pattern. That part was already strange. How could something be both a particle and a wave? How could it choose? But what truly disturbed him was something else. When the machine ran without anyone watching the results, the particles formed a wave pattern. They acted like waves spreading through water. But when he turned on the detector to observe which opening the particles went through, the pattern changed. The particles acted like solid objects. It was as if they knew they were being watched. He leaned closer to the screen. His heart beat faster than he wanted to admit. This made no sense. The particles should not care. They had no eyes, no mind, no awareness. He repeated the experiment again. He checked the wires. He checked the code. He even restarted the entire system. The result did not change when observed. The particles behaved one way when not observed. They behaved another way. He whispered to himself, "This is impossible." But it was not impossible. It was happening right in front of him. He remembered reading about this phenomenon years ago. The famous double-slit experiment had shocked scientists for decades. Great minds like Albert Einstein had struggled with its meaning. Einstein once said he did not believe the moon disappeared when no one looked at it. Yet these tiny particles seemed to suggest something very strange. Was reality fixed and solid? Or did it change depending on observation? The researcher stepped back and turned off the lights in the lab. Only the soft glow of the screen remained. In that dim silence, the question felt bigger than science. If observing a tiny particle could change how it behaves, what does observation really mean? Is it just measurement? Or is there something deeper happening? He thought about consciousness, about awareness, about the simple act of looking. Every human being observes the world every second. We look at objects, we measure, we think, we decide. Could it be possible that consciousness is not just watching reality, but participating in it? He shook his head. This sounded like philosophy, not physics. And yet the data did not lie. The particles were not fixed things waiting to be discovered. They were possibilities, only becoming solid facts when measured. He stared at the final graph on the screen. A clear pattern formed under observation. A different pattern formed without it. Two realities, one choice, observation, in that quiet lab. A simple experiment had opened a door to a dangerous idea. What if reality at its deepest level is not fully formed until it is observed? And if that is true, what role does the observer play in shaping the world? The young researcher did not have the answer, but he knew one thing for certain. The universe was far stranger than it appeared, and this was only the beginning. The next morning, the researcher returned to the lab with tired eyes but a clear mind. He knew the experiment was not broken. It was working exactly as modern physics predicted, and that was what made it so unsettling. To understand what he had seen, he had to go back in time. Back to the early 1900s, when scientists first discovered that the world beneath atoms did not follow common sense. In classrooms, we are taught that matter is solid. A table is a table. A wall is a wall. A person is a physical body made of tiny building blocks. But when scientists looked closer, those building blocks began to behave in strange ways. Particles did not act like tiny solid balls. Sometimes they acted like waves of energy. Sometimes they acted like matter. And sometimes they acted like both at the same time. This idea confused even the greatest minds. Niels Bohr suggested that reality at the quantum level does not have definite properties until it is measured. According to this view, particles exist in many possible states at once. Only when we measure them do they choose a single outcome. Albert Einstein was deeply uncomfortable with this idea. He believed the universe must follow clear rules. He famously argued that something hidden must determine the results. He did not accept that reality could be based on probability alone. But experiment after experiment supported the strange quantum view. The researcher thought again about the Double-slit experiment. When no detector was used, particles created an interference pattern. This pattern could only happen if each particle somehow passed through both openings at once. It was not choosing one path. It was acting like a wave of possibilities. Yet when a detector was placed to observe which opening the particle went through, the wave pattern disappeared. The particle behaved as if it chose only one path. It was as if the act of measurement forced the particle to decide. The researcher stared at a diagram on his screen. Two slits, one beam of particles, two very different outcomes depending on observation. This was not just strange, it was revolutionary. At the smallest level of reality, certainty did not exist. There were only probabilities, clouds of possible outcomes waiting to become real. In simple words, the universe at its core was not solid. It was open, flexible, unfinished. This idea felt almost alive. The researcher imagined reality as a vast ocean of possibilities, every particle like a wave that could move in many directions at once. But the moment it was observed, the wave froze into a single drop. He felt both excitement and fear. If particles exist as probabilities until measured, then what exactly is measurement? Is it just a machine interacting with a particle? Or is it something deeper? Most physicists explain it as interaction. When a particle interacts with a detector, the system changes. No mystery, no magic, just physics. And yet, the word observer continued to echo in his mind. Observer, not controller, not creator, but observer. Still, the role of observation seemed impossible to ignore. He looked around the lab, the chair, the desk, the walls. Everything appeared solid and stable, but beneath that solid surface, countless particles were dancing in uncertainty, existing as probabilities, not fixed objects. It meant that the solid world people trusted every day was built on something far less certain. The researcher realized something important. The experiment that should not work was not breaking the laws of physics. It was revealing them, and those laws suggested a reality far stranger than anyone expected. If the smallest parts of the universe behave this way, what does that mean for the larger world? What does it mean for life, for choice, for consciousness? The questions were no longer just scientific, they were personal. The researcher could not ignore the question any longer. For days he had focused only on the math, only on the machines, only on the data. But now another word kept returning to his mind. Consciousness, not the detector, not the wires, not the computer, but awareness itself. He sat quietly in his office and stared at a blank notebook page. At the top he wrote a simple question. What does it mean to observe? In physics, observation usually means interaction. When a particle touches a detector, information is recorded. Energy is exchanged. The system changes. Most scientists agree on this. There is no need for a human mind in the equation. The machine does the measuring, the particle responds. Simple. And yet, something about it still felt incomplete, because before any machine was built, before any detector was turned on, a conscious mind decided to ask a question. A conscious mind designed the experiment. A conscious mind looked at the result and gave it meaning. Without awareness, the data would just exist. No one would call it strange. No one would question it. No one would search for answers. The researcher leaned back in his chair. He was not saying that the human mind magically controlled particles. That would be too simple, too dramatic. But he could not ignore that consciousness was part of the process. Some interpretations of quantum physics suggest that the wave of possibilities collapses when observed, when measured, when information becomes known. But what counts as known? Is it enough for a machine to record the data, or does it become real only when someone becomes aware of it? This question had divided scientists for decades. Some argued that consciousness plays no special role. The universe follows its rules, whether anyone watches or not. Others suggested something more mysterious, that awareness may be deeply connected to reality itself. The researcher did not choose sides. He simply followed the questions wherever they led. He thought about everyday life. Every day, humans observe thousands of things. We notice some details. We ignore others. We focus our attention on certain experiences and leave others in the background. Attention shapes experience. If a person focuses only on problems, their world feels heavy. If they focus on opportunities, their world feels open. The external world may not change instantly, but their experience of it does, and that experience guides their actions, their choices, their future. he began to see a connection. At the quantum level, particles exist in many possible states. At the human level, life also presents many possible paths. In both cases, something selects an outcome. In physics, measurement selects one result from many probabilities. In life, decisions select one path from many possibilities. Could consciousness be the bridge between possibility and reality? Not by breaking physical laws, but by influencing which possibility has become actual experiences. The researcher walked back into the lab. The machines hummed softly. The screens glowed as before. Nothing looked different, yet everything felt different. The experiment was no longer just about particles. It was about the role of the observer, not as a passive watcher, but as a participant. He looked at the detector and asked himself, if observation changes the behavior of particles, then what does focused awareness change in human life? He did not claim to have the final answer, but he felt certain of one thing: consciousness was not separate from reality. It was part of the story, and the deeper he looked, the more the line between observer and observed began to blur. The researcher now faced a dangerous idea, not dangerous because it broke science, but dangerous because it could easily be misunderstood. He had seen people on the internet talk about quantum manifestation as if it were magic, as if a single thought could instantly change the universe, as if wishing hard enough could rewrite physical laws. He knew that was not how science worked, and yet, he also knew that something real was hidden inside the confusion. He began to define the idea carefully. Quantum manifestation was not about controlling particles with the mind. It was not about bending reality with imagination alone. It was about understanding how consciousness interacts with possibility. At the quantum level, particles exist as probabilities until measured. At the human level, life also offers many possible outcomes at any moment. A person can choose to speak or stay silent, to act or to hesitate, to focus on fear or on opportunity. Each choice collapses possibility into a single path. The researcher realized that manifestation might not be about changing the universe directly. It might be about changing the path a person takes through it. He thought about attention again. Attention is powerful. What you focus on becomes clearer. What you repeat becomes stronger. What you believe influences how you act. If someone believes they will fail, they may avoid trying. If they avoid trying, they reduce their chances of success. Their belief shapes their behavior. Their behavior shapes their results. No magic, no broken laws of physics, just the quiet power of consciousness guiding action. But the story did not end there. The brain itself is a physical system built from atoms and particles. Those particles follow quantum rules at their deepest level. Some scientists suggest that while quantum effects in the brain are complex and debated, the brain is still part of the same universe where probability and uncertainty exist. This means human thought is not separate from physics. It is an expression of it. The researcher stood by the window of the lab and looked at the city lights. Every building around him began as an idea in someone's mind. Every invention, every book, every company. First came a thought, then a decision, then action, then physical reality. Consciousness did not magically create matter, but it directed energy and effort toward a specific outcome. He started to see quantum manifestation in a new way. It was not about commanding the universe. It was about aligning awareness, belief, and action with a chosen possibility. When attention stays fixed on a goal, the mind begins to notice opportunities that were always there. The brain filters information differently. Behavior adjusts. Decisions change. Step by step, reality shifts from the outside. It may look like luck. From the inside, it feels like intention becoming real. The researcher returned to his experiment data. Particles collapse into one state when measured. Humans collapse possibilities into one future when they choose. In both cases, possibility becomes reality through interaction. He felt a quiet clarity. Quantum manifestation was not about escaping science. It was about understanding that consciousness is part of the natural process. The universe offers possibilities. Consciousness selects a path. Action makes it physical. It was simple, but also profound. If this was true, then the most important question was no longer about particles in a lab. It was about attention in everyday life. What are you choosing to focus on? Which possibilities are you giving energy to? Because whether at the level of atoms or at the level of human decisions, the possibility is always waiting. The researcher now found himself in deeper waters. The science had opened the door, but philosophy was waiting on the other side. For centuries, thinkers have asked a simple but powerful question. Is reality something we discover, or something we help create? When a tree falls in a forest, and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? This old question suddenly felt new again. Quantum physics had shown that at the smallest level, particles exist as probabilities until measured. But what does that mean for the larger world? Is the universe fully formed and fixed, or is it still unfolding in some way? Some philosophers argue that reality exists completely independent of us. Mountains stand whether we see them or not. Stars burn whether we observe them or not. Others suggest that while the physical world may exist, meaning does not. Meaning appears only when consciousness enters the picture. A star is just burning gas until a conscious being looks up and feels wonder. The researcher walked through a park one evening. He watched people pass by, each person seeing the same trees, the same sky, the same path, and yet each person experienced a different world. One saw beauty, another saw problems, another was lost in thought and noticed nothing at all. The physical scene was the same, but the experienced reality was different. This made him think about free will. If the universe is only particles following laws, are humans simply complex machines, or do we truly choose? Some scientists believe everything is determined by prior causes, every thought the result of brain chemistry, every decision the result of past events. Others argue that uncertainty at the quantum level leaves room for openness, for a genuine choice, for something not fully fixed. The researcher did not pretend to solve this debate, but he noticed something important. Even if the universe follows strict laws, human experience still feels open. It feels like standing at a crossroads where more than one path is possible, and in that moment, awareness matters, attention matters, choice matters. He realized that whether reality is fully created or fully discovered may be the wrong question. Perhaps it is both. The physical universe may provide the structure, the rules, the possibilities, but consciousness brings interpretation, direction, and meaning. It is like a canvas and a painter. The canvas exists, the paint exists, but the picture depends on how the painter moves the brush. In the same way, the universe may offer possibilities, but human awareness shapes the story lived within it. As he looked at the sky growing dark above the park, he felt a quiet shift inside. The debate was no longer just about particles or philosophy. It was about responsibility. If experience is shaped by attention, if meaning is shaped by awareness, then every moment becomes powerful. Not because humans control the cosmos, but because they participate in it. The question was no longer, is reality real? The question was, what role do you play in the reality you experience? The researcher returned to the lab one final time. The machines were still there. The detectors were still running. The particles were still behaving. In their strange and beautiful ways, nothing in the physical world had changed, but something inside him had. When he first saw the experiment results, he felt confusion, then curiosity, then doubt. Now, he felt clarity. Not because he had solved the mystery of the universe, but because he understood his place within it a little better. He looked at the screen where probabilities once turned into solid results. Wave patterns becoming particles when measured, possibility becoming fact. He realized that this pattern existed not only in physics, but in life. Every day, people wake up into a field of possibilities, different choices, different reactions, different paths. Most of the time, they move on autopilot, repeating old habits, focusing on old fears, expecting the same outcomes, and so the same outcomes appear. But what if awareness changes that? What if simply becoming conscious of where attention goes begins to shift the path? He thought about how attention works. When someone focuses on problems, the mind searches for more problems. When someone focuses on solutions, the mind searches for answers. The brain filters reality based on belief and expectation, not because the universe bends to emotion, but because perception guides action. Action shapes results. Results build experience. Experience reinforces belief. It is a quiet loop, a loop powered by consciousness. The researcher understood something simple yet powerful. Quantum manifestation was not about forcing reality to obey. It was about understanding that awareness is part of the process of becoming. The universe offers possibilities. Life presents choices. Consciousness selects direction. Action makes it real. He turned off the machines and stepped outside into the night air. The sky above him was filled with stars, each one distant, silent, and steady. They did not disappear when he looked away, but his experience of them changed. When he looked up, they became meaningful, beautiful, inspiring. Without awareness, they were just burning spheres of gas. With awareness, they became wonder, and in that difference, he saw the answer he had been searching for. Reality may not depend entirely on the observer, but experience does, and experience shapes life. He understood now that the power of consciousness is not dramatic or loud. It is subtle, present in every thought, every focus, every decision. The experiment that should not work had not broken physics. It had revealed a deeper truth. The observer is not separate from the story. Each person is both witness and participant, standing at the edge of possibility, collapsing one path into reality with every choice. As he walked home under the quiet sky, one final question stayed with him. If your attention shapes your experience, and your experience shapes your life, then what are you choosing to observe, and what kind of reality are you slowly bringing into focus?